There are two ways to achieve a 1/4 inch seam allowance using the standard presser foot. The first is the marking on the bobbin cover plate with the needle in the center position. The second is to use that outside edge of the presser foot as your alignment for your fabric. And then what you will do is you will move that needle over to the right. So we would need to go to the stitch width dial, and we're going to slide that to a number 2 position. Now, I strongly suggest, whether you're using the 1/4 inch marking on the bobbin cover plate, the outside edge on the standard presser foot with the needle to the right, or any of the 1/4 inch feet, that you always test your seam allowance to make sure that you are accurate. And just by using that outside edge of that presser foot, I am able to achieve that 1/4 inch seam allowance. However, the Jazz 2 comes with a 1/4 inch foot that is also ideal for achieving that same seam allowance. And how this foot works is, as I follow the edge of the profile on the foot down, you'll notice there's an indent on that toe. And that toe is actually where I'm going to guide the edge of my fabric. That will give me that same 1/4 inch seam allowance. You'll also notice that there's a singular hole on the foot. And what that does is that helps keep that fabric flat so it might not pull up in through that opening as it would on a traditional presser foot. The other thing that's very useful about this foot is the markings that sit on the right-hand side. Each of these markings is 1/4 inch apart, which makes it ideal for attaching binding. This would be my needle. This is where I would stop to sew, and I know then I have that space or that 1/4 inch from my fabric edge. Now there's another series of feet that also are perfect for that 1/4 inch seam allowance, and these are all optional presser feet and are all available for the Jazz 2 or can be used on the Jazz 2. This foot is very similar to the one that we just looked at. However, this one has a rail on that. And by a rail, what happens is my fabric can only go to that edge. It can't go any further. So this is ideal if you have difficulty seeing, or if you're just not great at keeping everything straight as you're sewing. And a lot of individuals, or a lot of sewists use this type of system. I happen to be one of those, not for every quilt that I do or every project, but oftentimes I will use a foot with a rail. The next foot is identical looking, or looks identical to the very first one we looked at, except for it's clear. And the great thing about this foot is that it still has that edge, it still has that indent for that toe, it still has that needle opening, but because it's clear, I can see everything. And that visibility for some of us as we're stitching or as we're putting something together is just something that we're after. So that is a great foot to add to your arsenal. Now the next 2 feet are also 1/4 inch feet. They're just a little different. And the biggest difference you'll see is that the size of it. They have a wider profile to the foot. And what that does is that allows the foot to fully sit on the feed dogs and the fabric to fully sit on the feed dogs. You still have that outside edge and you still have that indent. Now in this case, this foot has that rail or that guide, and you'll notice it's a little shorter, which allows you to go over what we call sometimes dog ears or fabric edges. Also allows me to slide fabric underneath because that toe curls up. Again, it has that opening, and that opening is a little wider in case I need to adjust that needle position further to the right for something like a scant 1/4 inch. The next presser foot is, again, a 1/4 inch foot, and it is identical to the one that we just looked at, except for it does not have that rail. Again, you have that outside profile, you have that indent in, and you have that toe. And that toe is where you would guide your fabric edge. You have the oval opening, which allows you to move that needle position further to the right for a scant 1/4 inch, and you still have those toes that curl up, which allow you to slide your fabric underneath. As you can see, the presser feet that you have available to you for a 1/4 inch seam gives you all sorts of options for achieving that 1/4 inch seam that you need for whatever project you're working on.